Scared even to mention the stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with The Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it's a national scandal that the MSM refuses to touch. But as it's revealed that the British taxpayer is spending an outrageous £7 million per day on putting up illegal migrants, 10,000 of which are arriving from NATO member Albania, is it time for us to take back control of our borders once and for all, especially as homeowners are now being urged to take in potentially dangerous migrants in an absurd Ukraine-style system. Fleet Street legend Calvin Mackenzie, who believes Britain is mad to tolerate this illegal invasion, gives his unfiltered take at 9:50. And as Britain faces one of the biggest threats to our national security ever, the tofu-eating wokerati are only concerned with bringing down the brilliant Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. In my digest next, I explain why Rishi Sunak must back her against the lefty vultures. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Also coming up, one of the world's best-selling authors and Tory grandee, Jeffrey Archer, who served as Deputy Conservative Party chairman under the Supreme Margaret Thatcher. So what does he make of the bitter civil war ravaging his beloved party today? And why does he think Rishi Sunak is the man to solve it? Lord Archer, back with me live in the studio at 10:15. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's ghoulish autobiography is getting ever closer, as today he announced a January the 10th release date for the book called Spare. Less than 4 months since the death of the late Queen and before the coronation of his father. So, is Prince Harry putting the royal family at threat? Meghan's biographer Tom Bower, socialite Lady Colin Campbell and commentator Nina Mishkov debate that in The Clash at 9:20. Meanwhile, the left really do hate the fact that the Conservative Party are leading the way on diversity. First, there was Labour deputy Angela Rayner.
I would be Deputy Prime Minister if we get into government, and, you know, that's more diverse, and we've got a very diverse front bench.
And then US TV host Trevor Noah spread this untrue slur about the response to Sunak getting the top job.
Watching the story of Rishi Sunak becoming England's first Prime Minister of colour, of Indian descent, of all of these things, and then seeing the backlash, you hear a lot of the people saying, oh, they're taking over.
What race-baiting nonsense. There was no backlash. So I'll give you the full rundown on all of those stories in our media buzz. And as an SNP minister resigns over the party's controversial Gender Recognition Act, Are Nicola Sturgeon and Keir Starmer prioritising woke ideology over women's rights? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe responds at 9:40. And it's been a bad week for two of the country's most controversial TV presenters, tricky customer James Corden and queue jumper Philip Schofield. And it's not getting any easier because our woke slayer-in-chief, Jim Davidson, gives his weekly dose of tough love in Uncancelled at 10:40. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages as they drop, and as ever, I'll crown a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. You know how grateful I am to the loyal viewers who are spreading the word about GB News. But I have to thank our loyal listeners too. It was announced today that GB News Radio is the UK's fastest growing news station. Our average weekly audience grew by a massive 50% according to official Radar ratings figures. So thank you all for watching and for listening. You can take GB News wherever you are. My digest on the campaign to bring down Superwoman Suella coming up, then my superstar panel weigh-in. Political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler. But before all of that, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thanks very much indeed. Well, I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom, and we start with some breaking news this evening from the last hour. We hear that Arsenal Football Club have confirmed its defender Pablo Mari has been stabbed in Italy. A statement from the club is saying the 29-year-old is in hospital but is not seriously hurt. Some reports suggesting his injuries aren't life-threatening. It follows local reports of an attack at a shopping centre, a supermarket, some people are saying, in Milan, in which one person has been killed. South Milan is the location. We understand several others have been injured. This is a developing story. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. In the meantime, in other news, it's 3 hours to the midnight deadline of calling an assembly election in Northern Ireland as talks to restore a devolved government have reached a stalemate there. The parties met earlier but failed to elect either a speaker or a first or deputy first minister. The Democratic Unionist Party says it didn't nominate ministers because of a lack of progress on addressing concerns around the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Irish Premier says there's still time to avoid a fresh election and urged the DUP to enter talks in these last hours. The Stormont Health Minister, meanwhile, says health workers and patients are being let down as a result of this political instability.
Our health service was in a fragile position before this latest crisis. But now it has been left with zero political leadership, with no budget, with no decision-making ability, and I am truly fearful for what lies ahead.
Meanwhile, Russia's president says the West's undivided global dominance is coming to an end. In a major address to his country, Vladimir Putin claimed Western leaders were playing a bloody and dangerous game, and he blamed them for stoking nuclear tensions. He accused the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, of being a bit out of it over comments she made about nuclear weapons. That comes as Ukraine continues its battle against repeated attacks in two eastern towns. Russian forces last night struck a main power network in central Ukraine, damaging critical energy infrastructure. Now, as you've been hearing throughout the day on GB News today, GB News understands UK authorities have been responding to multiple incidents of small boats in the English Channel. It's understood that at least 7 small boats were intercepted and more than 250 people have been taken back to Dover Harbour for processing. It followed a search for a person seen clinging to a buoy off the Kent coast, which is now being called off after the authorities failed to find any trace of anyone. The Prime Minister says he won't be attending the COP27 climate summit in Egypt next month. Downing Street says Rishi Sunak will be focusing instead on domestic issues, including preparations for the autumn statement. But it said the Prime Minister remains absolutely committed to supporting the climate conference, which was held in Glasgow last year, and tackling climate change as well. Other senior ministers, including the COP president, Alok Sharma, will represent the UK at the summit. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has spoken to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today. Downing Street is telling us this evening the leaders welcome the close alignment between the UK and Canada's values and priorities, agreeing on the importance of promoting global economic growth and stability. That's just about it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight.
I know how astute you are, so it won't have escaped you that the political establishment, the Westminster Blob and the MSM are currently on a deranged mission to bring down the brilliant Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Empowered by the way they successfully deposed two Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, in quick succession, these dark forces are now conspiring to destroy any brave politician who questions the status quo and challenges the orthodoxy. Suella is certainly one such politician, the new queen of the Tory right. For good reason, she is razor sharp and deeply committed to a mission to complete Brexit, to secure our borders, to stop the illegal migrant invasion over the Channel, to cut net immigration to the tens of thousands, to wage a war on woke policing, to enable freedom of speech and reverse lawless Britain. And she even believes the British Empire was largely a force for good. Of course, given Suella's bold, brave and daring agenda, she's now a target of our dire civil service, which tried to make life equally difficult for the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel. The briefings, including this apparent nickname, Leaky Sue, about her minor technical breach of the ministerial code by forwarding an email to her personal account, are now being politicised, even though it's something virtually every minister has done. They know Suella is an even bigger threat than Patel, given her no-nonsense approach and superior knowledge of the law in her former job as Attorney General, which saw her overturn a woke move towards women being written out of legislation. Look.
In the bill, it referred to me as a pregnant person. I actually was personally quite offended by it. I thought I'm a pregnant woman and I think that should be honoured in the legislation.
It's all premised on a misassumption, in my view, that ethnic minorities, myself as an Asian woman, must necessarily be a victim of white privilege, must necessarily be a victim of white fragility. I mean, these ideas are anathema to meritocracy, to British values.
I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream.
It's not only wrong for the police to take the knee, it is wrong for them to join in with political demonstrations. And it's not just that pandering to identity politics is a huge waste of time. They need to stick to catching the bad guys. It's not racist for anyone, ethnic minority or otherwise, to want to control our borders. It's not bigoted to say that we have too many asylum seekers who are abusing the system.
It's the Labour Party, it's the Lib Dems, it's the Coalition of Chaos, it's the Guardian reading, tofu eating, wokerati, dare I say, the anti-growth coalition that we have to thank for the disruption that we are seeing on our roads today.
Yeah, I know why they're trying to destroy her now. There are strong political reasons why Sunak must keep Suella in her cabinet, though. The Tory wet takeover of the party in an anti-democratic Ramona coup that goes against the wishes of both the party base and grassroots membership, with Suella, along with the new Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, are really the only rays of hope that this government might stand strong on culture war issues. As the former Tory minister Sir John Redwood wrote, are they attacking the Home Secretary because they do not want her to control our borders? We need a strong-minded, good lawyer as Home Secretary to stop people trafficking and the illegal small boats. Suella Braverman is the best equipped to do this, to save lives and control our borders. The sooner she is allowed to, the better. So I'm very clear on this. Sunak must hold firm against the civil service blob, Tory wets, the left and the incessant drumbeat from the media who want to bring down Suella because she's Britain's best hope of protecting our borders and defeating the growing tide of woke madness. But to respond now, my superstar panel. political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Dominique, are you with me here? Is there a very clear agenda from the blob to destroy Suella Braverman?
I think so. I think it's very strategic, though, because the reporting around Sunak's premiership has actually been largely positive, with a lot being attributed to the fact that he is the UK's first British Asian Prime Minister. And I think that's something that's actually rattled the Labour Party, particularly after Wednesday's Prime Minister's questions, where Rishi Sunak performed exceptionally well, I think, if I'm being honest. So Suella is the easy target. She's sort of the chink in the armour. She resigned over a technical security breach. Now, initially, this issue wasn't really viewed as anything too major. It was actually viewed to be because of Suella Braverman's disagreement with Liz Truss over immigration, which I think was probably the real source of the resignation. But the Labour Party is focused on this and is absolutely blowing it out of proportion. And I'm not going to mince my words here. They want Rishi Sunak to sack Suella Braverman because it will make the government look weak at a time when, against all odds, it actually looks pretty strong. I just think this is part of cheap political point scoring, top and bottom of it.
Well, it is Sean Bailey, and of course we know the MSM is going to go along with it, because we saw that, didn't we, with Liz Truss? They all knew that the moment Liz Truss U-turn, and there were two major ones, weren't there, the 45p tax rate and the sacking of her most loyal ally, Kwasi Kwarteng, and they knew she was finished the moment they did that. So they're hoping to repeat the strategy with Sunak. Now, I actually think Sunak is smarter than giving into that, because he knows that to keep the Tory right on board, he's got to have Suella as Home Secretary.
Look, it's more than just got to have Suella. He has to show that he cannot be dictated to. He's had the best start possible. Him and Boris seem to have buried the hatchet. Boris has said to his supporters, support Rishi, we need to get this done. So he's squared...
Oh, he hasn't quite said that,
He stepped out of it. And I'm getting noises from the MPs I know. They've been told they should get on board and support him. But the most important thing here, he must show that the MSN don't get to pick his cabinet. If he does that, then he is finished. I'm confident, actually, that he will make it to the election and do very well. Dare I say he will win, but the win starts now, and that means keeping Suella. The one thing I would say to Suella, though, there's large parts of the country that might agree with what she wants to do, but she needs to be a little bit less forceful in her delivery. I think if she takes the time to explain what she wants to do and why, I think she'll grow more support from the public.
But it makes a change, doesn't it? Because I feel like with politicians, because of how scrutinised they are, and that is understandable, their delivery does come across as wishy-washy and valueless. Yeah, and it's like, what do you
But going the other way, look, you can be in politics and keep responding to the left, and you keep giving the Guardian material, you keep giving the Eye material, or you can speak to the country. And there's some people...
but I think she is speaking to the country.
No, she's speaking to a portion of the country. If she changed her delivery, she could speak to a much larger part.
Well, do you know what? I don't think there's many folk across the country who genuinely want to go with the Labour policy of open borders. And I was watching an interview yesterday. It was one of the political pool interviews that was conducted by our own Tom Harwood with Keir Starmer. And he asked him such a really simple question. Did you tell Nadia Whittome to take down her tweet about Rishi Sunak being Asian? And Starmer just refused to answer the question. It's pathetic, and I think we need politicians who speak directly and say what they really think.
I'm not saying she shouldn't speak directly, but she must speak in a way that isn't frightening, that's inclusive. That's
that's the whole point. That's exactly why she's been dubbed Cruella, she's been dubbed Leaky Sue, etc. Because
no, they're just crap put-downs from the nasty, be-kind left who actually want to personally attack anyone who doesn't share their political philosophy.
We've seen her on camera saying that she dreams about planes full of refugees going to Rwanda.
What's wrong with that?
Well, because she said it's in like a Disney villain, hence her name Cruella.
Disney villain.
Basically, Rishi comes out and he says, it's all about integrity, professionalism and accountability. Accountability, she's broken the ministerial code numerous times.
And she resigned.
And Liz, but here she is back. I mean...
But it makes sense, right? It does make sense to be, she was in the job.
Yeah.
Then she suddenly gets replaced
She made a terrible mistake.
by Grant Shapps.
Yeah,
very minor
It's
mistake.
lots to actually bring it back.
It wasn't necessarily a minor
logical.
mistake. It wasn't necessarily a minor mistake. Liz Truss's aides already said that she lied to the PM about what time it was sent, etc., etc.
Yeah, she forwarded an email.
And the professionalism, all the tofu staff in other dispatch box. I mean, she looks.
Yeah, but come on, they all
she
do
looks.
that.
She looks ridiculous. And everything that Rishi said
Sam,
was
can I be honest with you, Sam?
reversed by the time he
Can I be honest with you?
hiring her
Do you
again.
know what is villainous? Do you know what is actually villainous?
Do tell.
Having an open borders policy which empowers these despicable people smugglers to allow tens of thousands of folk to come across the channel and put our safety at risk.
But
that's
that's 12 years of a Tory government. But that's what's happening right now. Surely it needs to change somehow.
The question that needs to be asked is, what would Keir Starmer do? Yes. It's as simple as that. What would he
Please
not
tell
do?
us.
And
I would love to know.
And Rishi,
We know he'd do nothing.
And
No one knows.
Rishi and Suella and the entire Conservative Party need to keep asking that question because they have no answer.
Well, it can't be any worse.
But Sean, your party also does have to deliver now because there's been way too much tough talk. And so basically that's why I think Suella Braverman is the only person who can deliver. She's the only person in the Tory party who actually has the balls to say to Rishi Sunak, we're going to have to leave the ECHR.
She's a distraction that Rishi did not need. Everybody was up. I actually quite like Rishi. I think, he could unite...
That's why he's not great.
He could unite the party, etc. But dragging back Suella, it was his first mistake, and again, it makes it look like cronyism.
According to who?
According to everybody. According to the nation.
No, you say everybody. But this is what I hate. And Dominique, we're seeing it so much now. It is groupthink, and it pervades the mainstream media in this country. It pervades most of the newspapers. It pervades Twitter. No, most of the public will actually agree with what Suella says.
Yeah.
The public want safe streets. The public want the borders protected. I am convinced of that.
And considering the story about a Channel migrant breaking into a woman's home in Dover, I think that
obviously that's shocking, but here we are 12 years into a Tory government, and it's still worse still.
I agree with Sam on that.
We'll let Sean defend the Tories on this. Sean, you come and defend the Tories on this.
Yes, the government needs to do better, particularly immigration. They need to have an idea and a plan about what they want to do. But to answer this thing about 12 years, what would it have been like under a Labour Party who have no plan?
Yeah.
So how do you know it'd be worse? You don't know that.
Because your current Labour Party has no plan and has never had a plan. No. It's not like for this last 12 years they've had a brilliant plan and they've been ignored. They've had no plan.
Well, no, let's be honest. They want unlimited immigration.
And that's fine. But what they should do, if they want unlimited immigration, they should tell the country.
Yeah, but of course they're not going to do that.
So Priti Patel, Grant Shapps, now Suella. How many Home Secretaries do we need to have before they actually fix this problem that Labour can't possibly fix themselves? It's a mess. The Tories are a mess. Come on.
Sam Dallas, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, my superstar panel, and they are with me all evening long. But coming up, as an SNP minister resigns over the party's controversial Gender Recognition Act, are Nicola Sturgeon and Keir Starmer prioritising woke ideology over women's rights? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe responds at 9:40. But up next in the clash is Prince Harry putting the royal family under threat with the publication of his memoirs. Meghan's biographer Tom Bauer, socialite Lady Colin Campbell and commentator Nina Mishkov debate that next. I want to know what you think though. Email me Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle at gbnews. Our poll running there too. We're back shortly.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Time now for the clash. Burma victim Prince Harry's announced today that his autobiography will be published on January the 10th, less than 4 months after the Queen's death and before his father's coronation. The book will be called Spare, a play on the phrase an heir and a spare, and is seen as a ticking time bomb within the royal family, with the bitter Duke expected to take aim at his father, his brother, and the institution of the monarchy itself. The book's press release says it will take readers immediately back to one of the most searing images of the 20th century. 2 young boys, 2 princes walking behind their mother's coffin. As the world watched in sorrow and horror, billions wondered what the princes must be thinking and feeling. And how their lives would play out from that point on. For Harry, this is his story at last. With its raw, unflinching honesty, Spare is a landmark publication full of insight, revelation, self-examination, and hard-won wisdom. But do you think Prince Harry could be putting the royal family at threat with the release of this bombshell autobiography, expected to slag off the new king? Let me know your thoughts by emailing me, Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. Our poll running there too. But joining me now, the author and journalist, one of the country's top royal biographers, Tom Bower, the socialite and royal insider, she's a royal author too, Lady Colin Campbell, and the journalist and broadcaster, Nina Mishkov. So Tom Bower, look, I remember you predicted it when you're on air with me, broadcasting during the late Queen's funeral. You always believed Prince Harry was going to push ahead with the publication of this book. To hell with the mourning period, to hell with the consequence on the royal family. And here we see it. It will be out only 4 months after the Queen's death and before King Charles's coronation.
Well, it's a very clever commercial ruse. And not only that, Dan, of course, it's the 3rd anniversary of Megxit, which you predicted in The Sun. This is what's so interesting about it all. They've chosen a date which is very significant. It comes, of course, after the Netflix series about the Crown and the Netflix series about them. The build-up will be enormous. And on top of that, it's being sold in 16 languages across the globe. So the impact will be literally global. And people will obviously scour the text for the slightest criticism of Charles, Kate and William, and they won't be disappointed. And of course, that'll be the headlines across the world, that Harry dumps on the royal family. And unfortunately, the royal family will suffer.
Lady C, I am told that your palace sources say they are concerned about the publication of the book. Is that correct?
Yes, I've been told that people at the palace are very concerned, but I've been speaking to relations and friends, and I have to tell you, I'm a lot less concerned than practically everybody is. I think that Harry has so blotted his copy and has shown himself to be to have such a loose relationship with the truth, that I think that, it's a case of the boy who cried wolf. I think no matter what he says, he has a credibility problem, and also he has a very maladjusted relationship with fact. And whatever he says is going to be very easily disprovable. So I really think people don't need to be quite as worried as they seem to be preparing themselves to be. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, look, if the Oprah interview is anything to go by, I won't be surprised if within a few days there will be calls for Spare to be reclassified as a work of fiction come January. But Nina Mishkov, you think this is a great thing, that Prince Harry wants to damage King Charles before his coronation?
I don't think it's necessarily a situation of Harry wanting to damage Prince Charles before his coronation. Harry has every right to tell his story. He has been absolutely castigated in the media for the last 2 or 3 years. He has every right to say what he thinks. And I don't know what the royal family are worried about. I mean, are they more worried about fact or fiction? Fact from Harry or fiction from the Crown? I mean, in the Crown, there's this episode where Charles is supposed to be asking for his mother to abdicate, which we absolutely know, according to John Major, is not a fact. Now, are they more worried about that or what potentially Harry is going to say? And, all this fuss, his mother did it. His mother cooperated with Andrew Morton, Diana, My True Story, and then gave that bombshell interview. And his father gave the interview to Jonathan Dimbleby and confessed on television to adultery, for heaven's sake. And at the same time, he cooperated with Jonathan Dimbleby on that memoir. And the memoir, he castigated his own parents, the Queen and particularly the Duke of Edinburgh. So all this speculation of what Harry might or might not do has all been done before by both parents, by King Charles.
Tom Bauer, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think the only reason that Harry has been castigated, as you say, over the last 2 years is because of his conduct. He behaved like a traitor, terribly disloyal to the royal family, and dumped on them. Well, of course he was.
He was dumped by the royal family.
Whatsoever. The other point is that Diana's cooperation with Morton was directed only at Prince Charles, as he then was, not against the whole royal family. She was rightly wounded. She never criticised the Queen.
No, exactly. She never tried to bring down the royal family, Nina, and I think that's what Harry is trying to do now. I'm going to be honest about this, Nina. Nina, just let me make this point, and then you can respond. I genuinely now believe that Prince Harry wants to bring down the monarchy.
I absolutely think that's a completely ludicrous situation. And Harry has never, ever criticised the Queen. He has never criticised the Duke of Edinburgh.
He's criticising
He
her
adores the
work.
Queen. He's never criticised the Queen at all.
He did. He did. And he criticised her upbringing of his father. He said quite specifically in the opera interview.
He was only quoting.
Nina, let Tom finish.
He said quite explicitly into opera that he was brought up in a bad way by Charles, but then all Charles was doing was treating him the same way as his mother had treated Charles. And I think he waited for the Queen to die so he could put that whole story into greater context.
I want to bring Lady C on this, Nina.
His
Nina, I just
father's
want
upbringing.
Yeah, and I just want to bring Lady C in because the point is, surely, Lady C, him and Meghan can try and say, oh, we're not ever criticising the Queen. I'm sorry, they're criticising the Queen's life's work by dumping on the monarchy. It is entirely a criticism of the late Queen.
They haven't only been criticising the Queen overtly, they have been criticising the Queen, the monarchy and the British people covertly. And, you know, I mean, with due respect to Mr. Bower, with whom I agree, and Miss Miska, with whom I sort of agree, I mean, I'm the only person who's written books on both sets of people, and Diana cooperated with me as well. So I think that Diana's disloyalty was a lot more measured and a lot more covert and a lot more focused just on Charles. But Diana was perfectly happy to trash the institution of the monarchy as if she felt she could damage the Prince of Wales as he then was. And Harry, to a certain extent, has replicated a lot of her conduct. And I'm sorry, I think the whole thing is absolutely appalling. Disloyalty has no place in family life, either privately or publicly.
No, I agree with that. Tom Bower, you believe that actually all of this speculation that the book might have been toned down somewhat could end up to prove to be untrue, because your point is that he's been paid £20 million for this book, and sure, he's donating 1.5 million or whatever it is to charity, but fundamentally, this is a huge money-making mission for him, and for Penguin Random House to make their money from that book, they're going to need his poisoned pen.
Well, absolutely, and in any case, he's not going to row back. And more importantly, will Meghan row back? Because I'm sure she's gone through the script much more carefully than Harry, if he's even bothered to read his own book. But Meghan certainly has. But they can't row back from all the 17 inaccuracies and lies they told to Oprah. So they can only add to them. And that must mean more and more poison. And in the end, this is their revenge. This is what they've been waiting for. They've got Netflix, they've got the book, they'll have interviews all over the world. They will be the #1 trending couple in the world for several days, and they're going to capitalize on it. And of course they're going to put poison, as the publishers wouldn't allow anything else.
I'd like to point out to Tom, just to go back to a point he made, that how Harry was supposed to be trashing the royal family and criticising the Queen by the way she brought up Charles. He was merely quoting his father, and the reason he was quoting his father was saying he was trying to break the cycle. The Queen, Charles, him, and the way they treated their children.
Yeah, but it's still a criticism of the Queen.
I'd like to point out to Tom two things. One, for some man who was so keen on facts and desperate to trash Harry, it's Oprah, not opera. And I think you should actually have caught on to that by this after she's been on television for decades. And the other things I'd like to point out is that you also have a book out about Harry and Meghan called Revenge.
Yes, it's brilliant.
I think you should own up that you are trying to sell your book. So you have a dog in the race. It's in your interest to create.
Well, Tom's been on this show talking about his book. I mean, I think his book is absolutely brilliant and is probably, and Tom, you'll probably like me say this, but I think it will probably end up being far more factual than what we're going to read in Spare. But I guess only time will tell. Lady C, you wanted a final word?
May I say something?
Yes, final word to you, Lady C.
Miss Scout's comments are wholly inappropriate.
I love you all. Thank you so much. The socialite, Lady Colin Campbell, the author and journalist, let's give it another plug, of the brilliant Meghan biography, Revenge, Tom Bower, and the journalist and broadcaster, Nina Mishkov. So who do you agree with? Is Prince Harry putting the royal family at threat with the release of his bombshell autobiography? Dex on Twitter says, yes, he's a complete waster. And much like Princess Margaret cannot get over being the spare. If only he had welcomed the easier supporting role, they could have done much good within the Queen's beloved Commonwealth. From Elliot on Twitter, I think I'd want to know what's in it before judging it, but I also think the royal family are in no more danger from Harry than they were when King Edward VIII abdicated to marry Wallis Simpson. Less, if anything. And from Ian on Twitter, I'll never read it. I don't have him in my life, and if he comes to my home and asks for help to fix a puncher, I'd say, I admired your mum, but no. And your verdict is now in. 68% of you agree that Prince Harry's book is a threat to the royal family. 32% of you say it's not. Now, coming up, as it's revealed, the British taxpayer is spending £7 million a day putting up illegal migrants. How do we take back control of our borders? Fleet Street legend Calvin Mackenzie gives his unfiltered take at 9:50. But next, as an SNP minister resigns over the party's controversial Gender Recognition Act, are Nicola Sturgeon and Keir Starmer prioritising woke ideology over women's rights? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe live on that next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Nicola Sturgeon was stopped in her tracks today after her Minister for Community Safety, Ash Regan, resigned over her opposition to the Scottish Government's Gender Recognition Act reform bill. She said her conscience would not allow her to vote in favour of the controversial legislation, which would see the age at which people can apply to change their legal gender reduced from 18 to 16. Plus, a person will be able to apply to permanently change gender after 3 months, rather than the existing time period of 2 years. Now, earlier this week, you remember Keir Starmer failed to answer whether trans comedian Eddie Izzard can stand on an all-female Labour shortlist. Look.
Do you support all women shortlists? And if so, would someone like Eddie Izzard have a place on those shortlists?
Well, Vic, let me just...
Would Eddie Izzard qualify to be on a Labour all-women shortlist?
Well, Nick, I'm not going to discuss individuals. Obviously, we'll look at each case as they come up, but I'm not going to discuss individuals on a programme like this.
Can Eddie Izzard be on an all-women shortlist for the seat of Sheffield Central?
Well, Nick, I'm not going to discuss individual cases.
But Eddie Izzard could sit on an all-women shortlist.
Well, Nick, I'm not going to discuss individual cases.
You just won't give me a comment on that?
I'm not going to discuss individual cases.
So, Anne Widdecombe, why is it that the left has such a problem with basic biology and standing up for the rights of women?
Well, I mean, that interview was hilarious, but it calls to mind, that Keir Starmer can't actually define what a woman is. And it's all part of the same thing. And they're in a complete bind because on the one hand, they're trying to say that a man can be a woman. But on the other hand, they're trying to say, well, of course, they believe in women's rights and they believe in all women shortlists and they believe in promoting women. And they've got themselves into the most unholy muddle. And it would be entertaining, but for the fact that there are some very, very serious issues here. We've had it already in England with people complaining that they've been in ladies' changing rooms in their underwear and men have walked in. That can be quite disconcerting, particularly if you're a young girl or otherwise vulnerable. And this is all in the name of political correctness. Well, now we've got a minister, thank heaven, with the same sort of courage that J.K. Rowling has shown and others have shown, saying, no, enough is enough. And actually, if you have respect for women, what you don't do is say that anybody can say they're a woman, quite regardless of biological fact. And, that is what it comes down to. It's the fiction of saying you can be what you imagine yourself to be versus biological fact. Now, we've had men becoming women and vice versa, for many, many decades. I can remember James Morris becoming Jan Morris. But it was a very, very long process involving some pretty nasty surgery and all the rest of it. And there was a very serious commitment there. That is very different from saying, oh, I'm a woman. I've worn dresses for 3 months. Lo and behold, I'm a woman. That is just a nonsense.
And Anne, I think we absolutely do have to provide credit to Ash Regan for doing this because Sturgeon runs the SNP in Scotland. It's like it's an authoritarian regime. I don't think another minister has actually resigned from the SNP since 2007. I mean, this was a big deal. Sturgeon's furious, so her career in the SNP, while Sturgeon remains leader, is finished. But her job as a minister was community safety, and she says, I simply couldn't go on with this legislation because it's going to put young girls at risk, and it would go against the principles of my job, which is about community safety.
And she's absolutely right. Of course, it does put young girls at risk. We've even had instances of men saying they're women and being sent to women's prisons with some pretty horrendous results for women in the most vulnerable of situations because they're in confinement. They can't even run away. And this being done at the behest of authority. So, Ash is absolutely right when she says it is a matter of safety. It is indeed a matter of safety. I can't understand why anybody with an iota of intelligence can't see that. I also can't understand why they can't see the danger to young people who may be going through a phase, believe quite wrongly that it's permanent, and then later on regret it. So, of course, it's right to have the age at which you can consent to something of that order of magnitude. Of course, it's right that you have to be an adult to consent.
No, indeed. And we saw from the NHS this week, finally the NHS speaking some sense on this, that actually the vast majority of teenagers who are looking to transition are going through a, quote, transient phase. That's the word from the NHS. Look, Anne, I just want to give a shout out to the other SNP politicians, by the way, who were brave enough to vote against Sturgeon. Yep. There weren't many of them. Stephanie Callaghan, Fergus Ewing, Kenny Gibson, Ruth Maguire, John Mason, Michelle Thompson, and then Annabelle Ewing and Jim Carlisle abstained. I just thought it was really important because they have put their careers at risk and they've done it for the right reasons.
Yeah. And history will justify them, even if Nicola Sturgeon is furious. History will justify them.
Yeah, and by the way, I like it when Nicola Sturgeon's a little bit furious. So Anne Widdecombe, thank you so much. But coming up, as British homeowners are urged to open their houses to illegal migrants, is it just a desperate attempt to clean up the government's immigration policy mess? I'll debate that with my superstar panel as our Media Buzz continues after 10. But before that, Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie tells me why Britain is mad to tolerate this illegal invasion. His unfiltered take straight after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart. And I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie is tonight's outsider. Now, the grim reality of Britain's migrant crisis has been laid bare with disturbing revelations that 10,000 single adult men from Albania have illegally reached the UK by boat this year. Border Force Chief Dan O'Mahony told MPs that the shocking number represented up to 2% of Albania's total male adult population. And his team were being, quote, overwhelmed with channel crossings. Crucially, he said Albanian criminal gangs in northern France would blame for sending fighting-age men to work in Britain's drugs, human trafficking and sex trades. In total, some 38,000 people have illegally reached the UK in small boats this year, costing the taxpayer an eye-watering £7 million a day in hotel costs. So, Calvin McKenzie, look, you're not pulling your punches on this. You say Britain should be in an asylum for putting up with this mess. Why are we such a soft touch? Why are we allowing this madness to go on, Calvin? £7 million a day on hotels alone.
Well, it's extraordinary. That, by the way, for your numerate viewers, that comes to 2 billion, north of 2 billion a year. And this number is getting bigger, not smaller. So when Rishi and co are all looking around to save some money, they might say to themselves, well, the first thing we can do is try and stop this supply of, which is rather good news for, I'm told, some of the hotel businesses in the north are doing spectacularly well, where previously they were empty. Now they're being taken over by the Home Office in order to house these people. Now, Albanians are leaving Albania at record rates. They go all over Europe. In fact, I was in Basel in Switzerland yesterday, where I was served a rather enjoyable gin and tonic by an Albanian. They are getting the hell out of Albania at 100 miles an hour. But coming here is a new idea. And immediately they land, they demand asylum. They know full well they will not be granted asylum, but they can sit on their backsides and have a hotel room and join in with their drug mates and various other businesses of which we probably can only speculate about, but they have been big in the sex worker business. So they are bad, by and large, bad people. The whole nation's not bad, but they are sending us the bill. As far as I know, Dan, have you got any spare money? Has anybody got any spare money at the moment? Everybody is skinned, and yet these people are living for free, and they know they're doing it. This is not an accident. They're not saying we're escaping from a terrible background. There's plenty of work in Albania. In fact, the bizarre aspect is because so many young men, those men are aged between 20 and 40, that 2%. Right? So many young men have left Albania. There's loads of work back there. And anyway, the Albanian guy told me this yesterday, that actually wages in Albania have gone through the roof because they can't find anybody to do the work anymore because they're all over here. And they're all over here doing bugger all, and yet over there's bad work. The thing is preposterous, and it is so upsetting. What Rishi and co, look, this is not an easy problem to solve, but what Rishi and co don't seem to realise, they can tinker about with austerity, they can do this, they can raise taxes, they can do what they like. But the truth about the matter is they want to be re-elected in 2024. Just solve this issue and the game is theirs. Labour don't want to come anywhere near it. Labour haven't got any solutions at all. They probably look upon all these people as probably socialist voters for the future. I've no idea. But the reality for the Conservatives is this is both a winner and a loser for them. And right now, they've been in power now for donkey's years. They've been in power for 12 years. Surely somebody with the brains that this guys have got. Did you see that 64% of them had private education? Now, that may be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's certainly a thing. Have they ever come across these kinds of people? Do they live at a different level, that 64%? I don't know. Would we be better off if we had a Conservative? I'm not suggesting this, but would we be better off if we had a Conservative government that was only made up of comprehensive people who actually lived cheek by jowl with these people? I mean, I hate to put it as a class war thing, and I don't really believe it, but I just wonder sometimes whether people actually in government understand how angry the ordinary person feels about this issue.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I am so convinced, Calvin, that Suella Braverman has to stay as Home Secretary, because she is one of the only senior ministers who's actually going to be prepared to say to Rishi Sunak, I'm sorry, you've got to get us out of the ECHR. That's the only way probably that we are going to solve this solution in the long term. And I think you're completely right. If the boats are stopped, the Tories have a chance of winning the next election. If the arrivals continue at this rate, they are finished, kaput. Because, Calvin, it's not just about the border crisis, although, of course, that is the biggest issue. It's about the crime on our streets. It's about lawless Britain. Why do we think crime's exploding? Why do we think our streets are so unsafe? Well, it's because Dan O'Mahony has confirmed, you know, all of these Albanian men tend to work in drugs and human trafficking and sex trades.
Yeah. And you don't think they hang around, do you, at Marston or any of these other camps? They go in there. They know they are not going to get the asylum, so they disappear into the system. I've no idea where these 10 or 12,000 are. I'd be absolutely astonished if Border Force did, and I'm absolutely astonished that if anybody at the top of government really understands this. Whenever they get asked a question about this, you know, on any kind of radio show or even on your show, they always dance round it. Oh, it's a very serious issue. We're talking with the French. We're talking with the Belgians. We're talking with somebody. But it actually, nothing ever happens. I've never known a policy area where nothing has happened for so long, and yet they know it's a vote winner.
Well, Calvin, I completely agree. I completely agree. But, you know, that is why I am backing Suella, right? Because who is the only politician who has come on my show and given a clear answer? It is Suella Braverman, and she said we have to leave the ECHR. That is the only way that we can stop the boats. Now, look, she said that when she was backing Truss as Prime Minister, but I know that's what she thinks, and Sunak, if he wants to stop the boats, if he wants to win the election, he's going to have to listen to her, Calvin.
Right, you say that. Now, I think Sunak is quite a clever bloke. I mean, to be honest, he was described by the now ex-business secretary as a socialist. So that made me feel slightly uncomfortable. I'm a massive Sunak, as you know, I'm a Sunak follower, whereas you and I had a slight disagreement about future Boris Johnson. Now, I regret to say the outcome, not for the first time in these debates, came on my side. But do you think that Sunak is capable, Rishi is capable, of actually saying, I'm going to do something which will make me very unpopular with the kind of...
No, I don't. I have zero faith of that, which is why I backed Truss over Sunak, because I don't think he will. But if it's a stark choice between stopping the boats and winning the next election and listening to Braverman, or electoral oblivion as the tens of thousands continue to invade us over the channel, maybe he will see sense. Calvin McKenzie, we'll continue the debate next week. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as it's revealed that a scandalous £7 million a day is being spent on housing Channel migrants every day, British homeowners are being urged to pick up some of the slack in an absurd Ukraine-style system. But is this scheme safe and sensible, or does it show the migrant crisis is now the biggest threat to our national security? I'll debate that with my superstar panel next. Tonight, I'm joined by Conservative commentator Dominic Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Meanwhile, it's been revealed Prince Harry's ghoulish autobiography is getting ever closer as he announces a January the 10th release date for the book called Spare, less than 4 months since the death of the late Queen and before the coronation of his father. So, is the Montecito Mona putting the future of the royal family at threat with his tell-all? That's our big debate at 10:30. Also coming up, one of the world's best-selling authors and Tory grandee, Jeffrey Archer, who served as Deputy Conservative Party chairman under the Supreme Margaret Thatcher. So what does he make of the bitter civil war ravaging his beloved party today? And why does he think Rishi Sunak is the man to solve it? Lord Archer back with me live in the studio to break his silence at 10:15. Meanwhile, why is Trevor Noah trying to project America's race issues onto the UK?
Watching the story of Rishi Sunak becoming England's first Prime Minister of colour, of Indian descent, of all of these things, and then seeing the backlash, you hear a lot of the people saying, oh, they're taking over.
We're going to tackle that race-baiting insanity in the media buzz at 10:30 plus, as Philip Schofield is dropped by Waitrose and James Corden is dropped, well, by the internet. Do either of these out-of-favour presenters deserve our sympathy? Legendary comic Jim Davidson gives his laugh-out-loud assessment of the woke week. He's uncancelled at 10:40. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspapers as they drop, and as ever, brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before the night is out. But first, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. Let's bring an update, first of all, on a story we broke about an hour ago. Arsenal Football Club has confirmed that its defender, Pablo Mari, has been stabbed in an incident in Italy. A statement from the club says the 29-year-old, currently on a season-long loan at Monza, is being treated in hospital but isn't seriously hurt. It follows local news reports of an attack in a shopping centre just south of Milan, in which one person has been killed and at least 4 others were injured. AC Monza's chief executive, Adriano Galliani, says Murray had a fairly deep wound to his back, which fortunately did not touch his vital organs, and that the club's thoughts are with Pablo and other victims of this dreadful incident. Now, talks to restore a devolved government have reached a stalemate in Northern Ireland 2 hours before the end of the Stormont Assembly election in Northern Ireland. The parties met earlier but failed to elect either a Speaker or a First or Deputy First Minister. The Irish Premier has urged the DUP to enter talks today, but so far without success. The DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, says his party didn't nominate ministers because not enough progress had been made on addressing concerns around the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Do not believe that sufficient progress has been made to addressing the issues of concern to the people that we represent. We were given a mandate, a clear mandate in the Assembly elections, that we would not nominate ministers to an executive until decisive action is taken on the protocol. That remains our position, and so today we will not be supporting the nomination of ministers to the executive.
Russia's president says the West's undivided global dominance is coming to an end. In a major address to his countrymen, Vladimir Putin claimed Western leaders are playing a bloody and dangerous game, and he blamed them for stoking nuclear tensions. He accused the former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss of being a bit out of it over comments she made about nuclear weapons. That comes as Ukraine continues its battle against repeated attacks in 2 eastern towns. Russian forces last night striking a main power network in central Ukraine, damaging critical energy infrastructure. Now, GB News understands UK authorities responded to multiple incidents of small boats in the English Channel earlier on today. It's understood at least 7 small boats were intercepted and more than 250 people have been taken back to Dover Harbour for processing. It followed a search for a migrant who was seen clinging to a buoy off the Kent coast, which is now being called off after the authorities failed to find anyone. The Prime Minister will not be attending the COP27 climate summit in Egypt next month. Downing Street says Rishi Sunak will be focusing on domestic issues, including preparations for the autumn statement. But he remains absolutely committed to supporting the climate conference and tackling climate change. Other senior ministers, including COP President Alok Sharma, will attend instead. And Rishi Sunak has been speaking this evening to the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Downing Street telling us the leaders welcomed the alignment of UK and Canada's values and priorities and agreed on promoting global economic growth and stability. That is it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time now for part 2 of Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. The first front pages are in. Sunak poll gives Tories election hope, leads the Eye. This is a new poll for the newspaper. where the PM beats Starmer on the economy and taxes, with many voters believing he would make a better Prime Minister. The Metro leads with Royals in Despair, a pun on the title of Harry's new book. It reports on deep concerns at the Palace about the Duke of Sussex's provocative memoir and the sad and personal secrets he may reveal in the 416-page book. I'm going to ask Jeffrey Archer about that in just a moment. But first, my superstar panel, back with me, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Now, failing politicians who have so far failed to tackle the crippling migrant crisis now appear to be lumping the mess onto cash-strapped Brits. Taxpayers are already forking out a staggering £7 million a day to accommodate people who cross the channel illegally, but our packed hotels are bursting at the seams. The situation is now so dire that the great British public are being asked to give their rooms just like refugees fleeing Ukraine. Rents and bills will be paid for by the government for 5 years under the scheme. However, with some 38,000 people making the journey to Britain in small boats this year, including 10,000 single Albanian men that Border Force could reckon seem to work in drugs and sex trafficking and human trafficking gangs, critics fear the crisis is now an unprecedented national security threat. So actually, should our politicians be first in line to house illegal migrants if they're asking the public to do the same, Dominique?
Well, of course they should, but the reality is that they won't. And I've long said when it comes to issues like these, when, you know, you speak to people who want open borders, who don't think borders should exist, I always want to ask them, do you genuinely think that these people are going to be housed next to the likes of, you know, Boris Johnson, next to the likes of Keir Starmer, next to those really well-off people? The reality is no, they're going to be placed in places that are already deprived and that already can't afford to be so oversubscribed with people from abroad. And what's really quite pernicious about this scheme is that I think it's really very calculated in terms of its timing. Saying that you're going to cover council tax, you're going to cover electricity bills, you're going to cover energy bills during a cost of living crisis, many people will jump at this simply because you know, they'll get help with their bills. And that's what I feel like is really quite manipulative. And the idea that people should be housing illegal immigrants from across the channel, it's extremely dangerous because we don't know who these people are. We don't know really anything about criminal records. They could be rapists, they could be murderers. That's just a fact. And you can say, oh, well, they'll pick people where, you know, they have an idea of their background. Well, you know, it's been reported that Border Force officials are allowing migrants to put in their own information. So really, there is no way of independently verifying who these people are.
I mean, Sean
it's a preposterous idea.
It's insanity. You know, we have Dan O'Mahony saying most of these Albanians who are coming here are criminals. Oh, but by the way, we want them in your homes. I mean, this is nuts.
I mean, the first thing to say, this would only be an ask, and British people will be able to say yes or no. It doesn't strike me as something that'll be popular. But the real thing is, we need to talk about this £7 million we're spending a day. I think we might need to recoup that because we may be able to go to Albania and all the other countries people have come from and help them where they are and stem the flow there and cut the crime for them and us. I think that's what we need to look at now. A decision like this, a scheme like this, feels a little bit too desperate, and it feels like it adds to people's personal risk. If you're under pressure for your bills and someone offers you this opportunity, you might take it and not want to. And what's the next step? What does it lead to? And of course, we need to look at our infrastructure. We need to look at, you know, how we provide doctors and stuff for people as well. And I think the greatest thing we can do now is look at this money, take it back maybe, and spend some of it at the source, help these people out before they make the trip. The trip isn't good for them and it isn't good for us.
But Sam Dowler, this is why we have to stop the boats.
Of course, I completely agree with that, but we have to look at the root.
Which is why we need the Rwanda scheme, then. You would agree that we need the Rwanda scheme.
I do not agree with the Rwanda scheme at all.
Well, how are you going to stop the boats?
Well, how are you going to stop the boats?
The Rwanda scheme, I've just told you.
The Rwanda scheme hasn't worked. It's obviously...
Well, it hasn't worked because it hasn't started.
It's obviously pie in the sky. I mean, it's obviously... I get it, where they came from. This was, you know, they plucked us from somewhere. Obviously, a deal was made with the Rwandan government. fair enough. But that isn't how we solve the problem. We solve the problem by going to the root of it, like Sean says. I mean, like, why are they coming here? I mean, do you say 10,000 Albanian men?
So what, we're going to solve the problems
assuming
in
they're all
Albania,
criminals, assuming they're all criminals, assuming they're all racists, rapists, etc. is
well, I didn't say
ridiculous.
all. I'm quoting Dan O'Mahony, who is actually an official from the government, who is saying a large proportion of them are.
To say, oh, the Mexicans, oh, they're all coming over the border, they're rapists.
It's not, no, I'm sorry, it's
of
not
course
Trumpian.
it is.
10,000 Albanians are not coming here to join the
They're risking their lives to get here. So why? So what? So what? No,
they're not risking their lives.
Of course they're risking their lives. They're risking their lives to drown in the channel.
They're paying people smugglers thousands of pounds coming over to this country,
the smugglers,
eager to disappear into the black economy. On weed farms, committing crimes, they're not here to join the NHS.
So you think they're all criminals? They're all criminals coming over.
No one hesitates to do dirty. But there's two things to say, Sam.
I'm sorry.
Albania is a NATO country #1. Right. Okay. It is not a war-torn country
at the source.
Where
why
people
are they coming?
all unsafe. #2, Sam, they're all coming from France.
Okay.
What's wrong with France?
But how many migrants go into France and then come over here? Surely more.
Let's put a semblance of reality on this. Let's be clear. The vast majority of these people are economic migrants.
Yes.
Right,
and that has to be accepted.
Yeah.
The second thing is they've been mixed up with people who are seeking asylum in the minds of people. We need to separate those two groups of people out because they need to be dealt with separately. And we need to ask, what does international migrant law mean if they're not staying in the first country, safe country they're arriving? That needs to go back and be looked at. But the bottom line is, unless we deal with this at source, we'll continue to have these huge numbers.
And the point is the individuals, once they arrive here, now, whether they were criminals or not in Albania, the problem is once they arrive here, the Albanian gangs who are part of bringing them here are the ones who completely dominate the drugs trade, human trafficking, guns and prostitution.
And
that is evidence from Dan O'Mahony to the Home Affairs Committee.
Okay? But who is in charge of the processing of them? Who's in charge of the processing of the Conservative government at the moment? So clearly they're not doing a good enough job.
Yeah, they're not doing it.
We all agree with
Of course. So why
job.
suddenly say it'd be worse under Labour when it's clearly terrible under the Tories?
Because you have absolutely no plan, and your Labour plan seems to have an open border.
Well, Sam, I didn't actually make any of this party political. I've said all politicians, actually. This is a national emergency.
It is.
All politicians should try and solve it. Final word, Dominique.
But what's also concerning about this is the involvement of Serco, which was the company that was in charge of track and trace. Really, is there any motivation for these people to stop coming? Is there any motivation for these companies to want these people to stop coming when they're set to make £150 million out of paying people to hold migrants in their houses? Really, I don't think so. A lot of people are making a lot of money out of this.
No, indeed. Now, the left's hypocrisy knows no bounds, but it's safe to say their latest round of identity politics virtue signalling has sensationally backfired. Fresh off the back of Labour MP Nadia Wootton saying Rishi Sunak at #10, quote, wasn't a win for Asian representation, Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner was left tongue-tied, that doesn't happen often, when quizzed about her party's own lack of diversity at the top. Watch.
What's wrong with the institutional structure of the Labour Party that, as yet, you've never appointed a leader from an ethnic minority or a woman as leader? What's wrong with the structure of Labour?
Well, we've got the most diverse parliamentarians of any political
party.
But
I'm talking about that absolutely top level. Why have you never done that?
Well, I would be Deputy Prime Minister if we get into government, and, you know, that's more diverse, and we've got a very diverse front bench.
But obviously, you've just said how important it is to see Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister.
Yeah.
You'd want to see a Labour...
and I hope we get the candidates come forward after Keir.
I'm sure Keir Starmer's delighted to know that Angela Rayner is going to be his Deputy Prime Minister. Sam Dowler, Sean Daly, Dominique Samuels, do stand by because coming up, my superstar panel return. And as Prince Harry's tell-all memoir approaches less than 4 months after the death of the late Queen, is he putting the future of the royal family at duet with his book? We'll debate that at 10:30. But next, why is Rishi Sunak the man to end the Conservative civil war? Former Tory grandee and one of the world's best-selling authors, Lord Jeffrey Archer, joins me live straight after the break.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now I'm delighted to say one of the world's best-selling authors, one of my all-time favourites, Jeffrey Archer, whose new page-turner Next in Line has just been released. And he joins me now in the studio. Here is the book. But Lord Archer, we have to kick off, don't we, with the political mess that your beloved party...
Why do? You've been going on it for about weeks now. I mean, you've got anything more interesting to discuss, Dan? I didn't cost London to hear your views on Liz Truss and Sunak.
Well, look, you...
Try harder.
But the thing is, it's a full-on Tory civil war now, but you could probably say, if only you'd listen to me, because you actually backed Sunak...
Yes.
In both leadership contests.
Yes.
Even though there was only a vote for the first.
Yeah, but...
whereas I obviously was backing Truss.
You were backing Truss, yes. It's your judgment that I've always been worried about. You're quite right. No, I thought my attitude was very simple. The whole world is in a financial crisis. We're all facing the problems of mortgage, tax, everything. And as someone who'd served as a chief secretary and Chancellor of the Exchequer, I really wanted at the top. I wanted someone who understood the figures and would get us back in a straight line again. And I think this time we've chosen well. Though you're quite right to point out I voted for him both times.
Now, you were, of course, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. You must understand that the membership and the grassroots of the party, many of whom watch this show, they are furious, Geoffrey. They are ropeable over the fact that they were not given a vote on the leadership. How do you think the Tories can mend that relationship? Because many have been resigning. They've been resigning in their droves this week from the party because they feel that there's been an anti-democratic coup going on here.
It was brilliantly done by the 1922 committee.
It was a stitch-up.
Let me have a word. It was brilliantly done by the 1922 committee. If they'd gone to the old rules, and instead of saying you have to have 100 votes, you have to have 20 to get on the ballot, Boris would have been straight on the ballot. He would have ended up in second place behind Sunak, and when it had gone to the constituencies, Boris would be Prime Minister. Now the 22.
And what's wrong with that?
Wait, patience, child. When they got the 100, you may well say that. That's a fair point. Yeah. Fair point. Fair point. Having got the 100, and Boris Johnson being abroad at the time, he had to rush back, and they said it had to be by Monday 2 o'clock. So no one was physically in the House of Commons other than running in that moment to vote. If they'd said 20 only and we'll have a week, he'd have got back in. He'd have got the 20 easily. He'd have been in second place. And by Friday, and today is what, Thursday, he'd have been Prime Minister.
So you're confirming, really, that this was an anti-democratic stitch-up by the 1922
I said nothing
committee.
Of the sort. I merely gave you the facts, Dan. I know you like the facts.
But do you buy into this argument? Because I hate it, actually. It really annoys me. But do you buy into this argument that the Conservative Party felt like they needed to restore the power to the grown-ups in the room? Because I often think when they say the grown-ups in the room, what they mean are the technocrats, the folk who don't challenge the orthodoxy.
No, I don't agree with you. I thought many years ago, and indeed spoke supporting it, that it would be good to let the members have a vote. I was 100% in favour. I'm bound to admit I've come round. Oh, no. I think the leader of the party should be chosen by people he or she works with on a daily basis and know him. And secondly, and more importantly, if you have someone who gets 200 votes and someone who gets 70, that person with 70 has to live in the House knowing that 200 people sitting behind him or her aren't 100% on their side. Don't forget, the person you supported, Liz Truss, only got 50 votes in the first round. She was never even in second place. Only until the last moment did she get into second place, and then the members got it for her.
Well, indeed.
Well, I can see that's democratic, Dan. I hear where you're going, but I don't think it's the right way to pick the leader.
Well, look, I think what's interesting when it comes to Truss is that because of what you've just pointed out, she was finished from day one. And I think the party does need
I think there's a point. I think that's a fair point.
Because they were out to get her, weren't they? The MPs didn't want her. But I think what they've
Well, she worked quite hard at it herself.
Well, she made mistakes. She made mistakes. We'd agree she made mistakes in terms of how fast she went with the mini-budget. But the fact is the party could have rallied around her and they did not. They wanted to depose her. And I think the issue that you've got is that at the moment, it looks like your party is full of backstabbers.
Well, the other factor is that there comes a period in life where it's time for a change. You will have been hearing this for weeks. When Margaret Thatcher was in power, followed by John Major, we had 17 years. When Tony Blair was in power, followed by Brown, they had 11, 12 years. When we get to the next election, assuming it's in 2 years' time, we'll have had 14 years. The British people have a tendency to say, let the other side have a chance after such a long period of time. And I've nothing against that. I think that's fair enough. I think it'll be a miracle if the Tory party win the next election. My own bet would be we would lose by 35 to 50. but we'd have lost by a whole lot more if we hadn't put Sunak there.
Fascinating. Now, look, I want to talk about your book.
Well, that's good of you, because I thought that's why I came on. I didn't know I was going to have another chat about...
Come on, I've always got to talk politics with Jeffrey Archer, always. But no, this book is fascinating, right, because it's part of the series, which I absolutely love, the William Warwick series, but this instalment, I guess, what would you say? It fuses real-life events in terms of Princess Diana, who actually was someone who you were pretty close to. I mean, I will always remember the footage on that famous day where Princess Diana stands up in front of the world, probably her most watched speech, and announced that she was retiring from public life. And you were there. You were there that day, and I believe you even went back or drove her to Kensington Palace afterwards.
What happened was, the day before the Prime Minister rang me and called me into Number 10 and said she's going to make this speech.
That was John Major then?
John Major, yes. John Major said she's going to make this speech, and she's asked for you to be with her all day, which I was very touched by, and you mustn't change a word of the speech. So it became clear to me she hadn't written the speech. The speech had been written by the mandarins. And we went through a very tricky day. The people who were at the function thought it was a normal charity day, and she would be making a charity speech. And of course she was making this speech saying, I'll be withdrawing from public life. Actually, you're wrong about going back. That was the mistake I made. When we got her out of the room after when we got her out as quickly as we could, got her into the car, she went back to the palace. I learned from her some time later, I said rather casually sometime later, what happened that night. She sat and watched television with a meal on a tray. And yes, I do regret not saying, would you like Mary and myself to pop round for the evening and be with you? Because I assumed, as I bet you would have assumed, there'd be someone to meet her, someone to be with her. There was no one. And I feel to this day, yes, I should have said, would you like us to come round and spend the evening with you?
Yeah, it's so sad that there was always a certain loneliness with Diana, which never made sense.
That was
how
bound
loved
to be.
She was.
That was bound to be, Dan. She was in this remarkable situation where wherever she went, she was worshipped. So that was that was bound to be. I think that caused a loneliness in itself. But that particular night was not good.
But here you are, writing about a woman who actually was the world's most famous person, as you say, on the front of cover of the book. She was also a friend, though. So I imagine there is some nervousness about how that's going to go down, especially with the people who were also friends with her. Is it true, I've been told anyway, that members of the royal family have since read the book?
2 members of the royal family have written to me saying how much they enjoyed it, which was a relief, because you're quite right. I naturally worried, would it be misinterpreted, having known her quite well, 25 years later, writing that, and with people already saying, because you see on page 3, is this a true story? You have to decide how much she told me and how much I made up. That's been the fun. And I was, you're quite right, worried that I might have offended someone, and was absolutely delighted when these 2 letters came through the post saying we loved it.
That must have been a great feeling. I have to ask you, speaking of royal literature, today it has been announced that Prince Harry is releasing his autobiography. It's going to be called Spare, out on January the 10th.
A clue.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like really bad timing, doesn't it? The Queen's will not have been 4 months dead by the time the book's out, and King Charles hasn't even been allowed to have his coronation. What's your response?
Well, when I first heard, and I can only tell you what I've read in the press, when I first heard they were paying a 20 million advance for the book, I realised there had to be something between the covers of that book that I'd never read before. Otherwise, why would they pay 20 million? So there's got to be some fairly unpleasant stuff in there. And I did hear, or I did actually read in the Sunday Times, that when he left to go back to America, it was made clear to him that if he talked about the funeral in a disparaging way, or talked about that weekend in Scotland in a disparaging way, there was no way back for him. So what will shock you, Dan, or perhaps you already know, checking the bestsellers list tonight, the book is not out for 10 weeks, and it's #1 on the bestsellers list tonight. More people are buying it 10 weeks before it comes. I wish they'd do that with mine.
I know. I was going to say, how depressing.
10 weeks before it's #1, which is staggering. So it will sell millions.
Yeah, well, Jeffrey Archer. This should sell millions too. Next in line, latest in the William Warwick series. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Now, coming up in Uncancelled Ads, Philip Schofield is dropped by Waitrose and James Corden is dropped by, well, the internet. Do either of these out-of-favour presenters deserve our sympathy? Our woke slayer-in-chief, legendary comic Jim Davidson, gives his laugh-out-loud assessment of the week at 10:40. Next, in the Media Buzz, we're going to continue this discussion about Prince Harry. Is he putting the future of the royal family at threat with his tell-all memoir? That's our big debate, straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages have just been delivered. This is a really interesting one, actually. Front page of The Sun, an exclusive that Prince William will not be going to Qatar to watch England play in the World Cup over a growing row over the country's human rights record. Now, that's significant because, remember, William, president of FA, due to travel to Qatar next month. I genuinely do believe this is the right decision in this case. No way back, leads The Guardian. It says that on the day Shell reports another round of bumper profits and UK temperatures hit 20 degrees in October, the UN finds there is no credible way to keep the world below the 1.5 degree Celsius global climate change. What it basically is, guys, is more fear porn. They want you to be terrified. Don't fall for it. The Daily Telegraph reports on the PM's plans to expand the windfall tax grab. Sunak could target energy firms as he tries to raise billions of pounds to balance the books. Maybe that's why people call them socialists these days. Jacob Rees-Mogg does anyway. The Independent leaves with mental health patients revealing systematic abuse after investigation by the paper. It revealed teenagers were treated like animals by award stuff. That's terrible. Daily Mail, we're going to be talking about this in just a moment, aren't we? With the royals dreading the publication of Harry's memoirs. World exclusive on the front page of the Daily Mirror. Ghislaine Maxwell enjoys a jog in the sun. They reveal the socialite's daily, or disgraced socialite now, daily routine in the US prison where she's serving 20 years behind bars. My superstar panel return now. The political commentator Dominic Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Now, with the reveal of his vicious tell-all book cover and its deliberately provocative title, Spare, it's clearer than ever that Prince Harry, I think, is on a mission to destroy the royal family. I've written in a new column for the Mail Online tonight, it is going to be a very miserable Christmas for the royal family, who remain in the dark as to the book's contents as the torturous wait for publication day on January the 10th continues. How tragic that Harry will stop at nothing for his version of the truth to be published. To hell with the consequences for his father, brother, the memory of his grandmother, or even the future of the monarchy itself. And Dominic Samuels, it really feels like the vast majority of folk in the UK now are gathering around the concept of we just don't like the way the Sussexes are behaving now. They want to actually bring down the royal family. It's so wrong.
And it just begs the question for me, even with the title Spare, and we all know the sort of narrative around, you know, the heir and the spare, how William was probably treated differently to Harry. And I think Harry, from his behaviour, has really internalised that and genuinely does seem to have a very cold and calculated vendetta against particularly his father. And that's who I feel as though this book is designed to hurt. That being said, I'm an advocate of free speech. I think he should be allowed to write a book detailing his truth, should we say, as the lefties like to say it. But at the same time, the motivations for this are clear. And he has a vendetta against the royal family.
He can write the book, because actually I've had people coming at me for that reason today, saying, oh, I thought you believed in freedom of speech. He can write the book. I can criticise him for writing the book. And what I can say, Sean, is this is a man so out of touch from reality, because being a member of the royal family has given him a life of unthinkable privilege. Unthinkable privilege. His father has funded a decadent lifestyle for him for decades, right? And we're meant to feel sorry for him. We're meant to believe that Prince Harry is some sort of victim. What baloney.
Well, let's wait to see. I am now probably more excited about seeing the context of the book than I ever have been. I was one of those who it could have passed me by, I'd have been fine. But the way it's been built up, it's been a masterpiece of marketing. I hope, actually, it's the first step in rebuilding a relationship. Look, my brother...
How do you think that's going to be?
Because, listen, you can't rebuild a relationship unless...
Sean!
Hold on, let me just say my piece. Let me say my piece. First and foremost, I like to be positive around family, and you can't resolve a heartfelt wrong until you express your
Okay, but Jeffrey Archerwright, who knows more about the publishing industry than virtually anyone, says you don't get an £18 million advance for a book unless you are about to dish the dirt and provide a whole load of details that the world don't know.
I don't doubt that's the truth, but I'm just saying I hope that once he expresses himself, he can return to his family. My brother passed away a few years ago now, and it was really painful for me, but my friend said to me, but you had settled with your brother all the things you needed to settle, and actually that helped me through the grief process, and I would just like them as brothers to get back together, and this could be part of that.
Well, of course. I would like that too. But Sam Dowler, the issue is, believe me, the moment that this book is published, I think it's the final nail in the coffin for the relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry. Because
I agree.
I've covered this story for a long time, many years. And what a lot of people fail to understand is that King Charles is actually far more forgiving of Harry than Prince William. Prince William is ropeable. He is furious. He thinks the idea that Harry painted his family as racist is inexcusable. And remember, he also allowed Meghan to come for his wife, Kate, in that interview with Oprah Winfrey, which I think, in his view, is inexcusable.
Well, let's not forget, you and I were in Windsor together, I believe, on the day of Meghan and Harry's wedding, and what a wonderful day it was. I mean, it was beautiful. Everybody was.
I wasn't invited.
We weren't at the wedding, FYI. But it was, you know, the
whole country came together, and obviously vibe, and we celebrated.
Yeah, we did.
And they then tried to paint a narrative that the whole country was racist and hated them, which was utter rubbish.
Which wasn't true, and we were
but
there.
But you're not on the Meghan fan bus anymore.
I'm not.
What about the Harry fan bus?
I wasn't. I never was.
The woke-topians.
Well, I'm on the side of families in general. We all have families.
Yeah, but we all
have
are. But he's about to trash his family. So look, what do you really want to say about this? Right. Because you're Mr. Woke, are you not prepared to actually say something negative about Harry and Meghan? Is that what this is about?
No, I'm not going to say anything that I don't believe is true. I think that, like you said, he got a huge pay packet for this, and they would have expected him to come out with a lot of.
Yeah, so what's your point? Are you prepared to criticise him for doing this?
Yes, I don't want him to do it. But like Sean says, I do have hope that there might be things in the book that, you know, are olive branches. I think at the end of the day as well, after the Queen died, he went back to the publisher to say, oops, I don't want to say that, because now, obviously, the person I think who is the subject of his ire in this whole book is his father, and possibly Camilla as well, and now his father is the king.
Oh, yeah. He may have done some rewrites.
The problem, going back to the pub, this is where 18 million becoams a problem. To go back to the publisher after they've given you that big advance.
They won't want him to do that.
They won't want to change.
And what I love today, he's making £18 million advance. Oh, but I'm donating £1.5 million and £275,000 to charity. But what about the 18 million that you're pocketing? Now, I, like many people, have been highly critical of backstabbing Rishi Sunak's ascension to Prime Minister without a single vote being cast, because that's what we call free and open political debate. But the lefty American media is in some sort of desperate need to paint Britain as a racist hellhole and project their problems onto us. So despite Rishi being widely celebrated as Downing Street's first PM of South Asian heritage, race-baiting host of The Daily Show, Trevor Noah, has gone viral for completely inventing a racist backlash that simply doesn't exist. Let's watch him, quote, unpack this figment of his imagination.
Watching the story of Rishi Sunak becoming England's first Prime Minister of colour, of Indian descent, of all of these things, and then seeing the backlash is one of the more telling, it's just one of the more telling things about how people view the role that they or their people have played in history. And what I mean by that is this. You hear a lot of the people saying, they're taking over. You know, now the Indians are going to take over Great Britain, and what's next, and what? And I always find myself going, so what? They literally, people are complaining about this. I can't believe Rishi Sunak, you've got this Indian man who's now King Charles is still the king of Jamaica.
I mean, Dominique, he literally invented a backlash. Where is the backlash? There has been no backlash, and this is what makes me sick. People like Meghan and Trevor Noah trying to present us as a racist country. The country has embraced the fact that Sunak is the first Asian PM.
People like Trevor Noah, highly involved with the Democratic Party, they deal in the business of division and race baiting. So it's no surprise that he's invented this problem that nobody's really ever heard of except Trevor Noah. And
Sean, where's the backlash to Sunak as PM because of his race?
I think what he's done is disgusting. He comes from a nation that was destroyed by race politics, destroyed by racism, and to do that and have no basis for it is absolutely disgusting. But he knew who he's speaking to. He's acting up for his crowd. But actually, I think he should be taken to task. If I was Rishi, I would be taking him to task because it's important not to be.
Well, Sam, the PM today, his spokesperson in response to Trevor Noah did say he believes Britain isn't a racist country. In other words, Trevor Noah, you butt out.
Well, he's far removed from the Tucker Carlsons of this world who do actually go out to divide and make problems. And I don't think Trevor Noah is. I do quite like what Trevor Noah does normally, but in this situation, I do think he's got it wrong. I think by getting a couple of tweets from a couple of racist people saying like he's not our prime minister, etc. Blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, I mean,
of course. But you can make a story about anything. And I think that's what this was. He tried to make a segment out of something that didn't really exist.
Genuine backlash in this.
And I agree, that hasn't.
The only backlash has actually come because there was no democratic vote for Sunak.
That's the only reason.
Come to power. It's nothing to do with
what's dark about it is that he seems to be like salivating at the mouth at the idea that there's racism.
Yeah. But then
that's what these people thrive on.
But then why didn't the Tory member Heartland? Why didn't they vote for him? Why didn't they vote for him over Liz Truss? Then was there racism in that?
They wanted Kemi Badenoch
to do with race.
He's a black
How do we know that?
Nothing to do with
Sam. She
it
looks
was
really
to do
black.
with policy.
Hold on, Sam. That's simply not fair because the person who was very popular with the Tory Heartland was Kemi Badenoch, who's very black, and also Sorella Rayburn, who's very Indian. So I don't accept that.
Believe me, the Tory base didn't vote for Sunak because, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said, his policies were on the socialist side. Now, Sam Dowler, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels do stand by because coming up will be the crowning moment of the show as we reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in Uncancelled, as Philip Schofield and James Corden are found wanting. Should we shame them or just laugh at them? Legendary comic Jim Davidson goes woke slaying on the week that was. First, though, very quick look, just a few seconds, at what's coming up in Monday's show. Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, after Rishi Sunak is chosen by the Tories to be the first British Asian Prime Minister, once again leaving Labour in the dust on diversity, Dr. Tony Sewell explains why this is a result of judging politicians by their talent and not their race. Plus, Neil Oliver and Star Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover give their unfiltered take on the issues that really matter to you. And I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the Sunday Mirror's political editor Nigel Nelson, and political commentator Belinda DeLucy. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And woke slayer-in-chief, legendary comedian, one of the nation's favourite, Jim Davidson, here now to unpack the latest nonsense of the liberal elite. Now, the mass cancellation of TV presenters has continued this week after James Corden was forced into issuing a grovelling apology over minor rows with a waiter. Watch.
I totally understand. I understand everybody getting upset, and I accept everybody's opinion. I also hate, as I said to the owner that day, that I've ever upset anybody, ever. It was never my intention.
Cringe. And then there's been another blow for the Secretary of State for queue-jumping, Philip Schofield, after he's seen his wine range dropped by Waitrose after scathing reviews. So, Jim Davidson, look, you know I hate anyone being cancelled, and this felt just like so embarrassing. James Corden feeling like he had to give a 4.5-minute apology for being slightly rude to a waiter. What's your take, Jim?
Well, if I was James Corden, I would not just go in that restaurant. I mean, by the look of him, he doesn't need to go in a restaurant for another couple of years, really. And you've got to remember, though, that he's a celebrity. I mean, I'm not a big fan. I think he's the luckiest man in the world. But if he goes into a restaurant, and just because he's having a good time and he's got lots of money, it might be an odd waitress or someone that takes umbrage. I'm not going to wait on you. I'm not going to serve you, etc., etc. And, of course, they can go and make up whatever story they want about him. So he might be a victim of that. But having said that, he's got to be aware that everyone is a cameraman. Everyone's going to complain if you say something wrong, even if you don't think it's wrong. You've got to bite your lip. I've learnt that. Ish.
Yeah, we don't always succeed.
Philip Schofield.
Yeah, what about Schofield? His wine's been axed. Apparently it tastes awful.
Well, it's not that. The corks won't come out, unlike him, if you excuse the pun. And so...
Took a long time for that cork to come out of Schofield.
Yeah, and we all knew it was coming out eventually. We just couldn't get it out.
Now, Jim, latest in the go woke, go broke phenomenon. This is Doctor Who, right? So it's had to bring back David Tennant because basically the show is so woke now, all of its loyal viewers are just switching off. They've ruined it, haven't they, Jim?
Yeah, they have. And what David Tennant should do, because I think I was always a Star Trek fan. I thought Doctor Who was a bit wooden, like a sort of a sci-fi pantomime. So David Tennant as Doctor Who should go back into the past, find out where woke came from and stamp it out immediately. We might get some better TV shows. That's all about time travel. Time travel cannot happen, Dan, because if time travel did exist in the future, we'd be full of tourists from the future. I think Sean Bailey is from the future, or maybe he might be the future.
Well, yes, he could be the future, couldn't he? Political future. I'm sure he's loving that. And Jim, finally, look, I have to ask you about one of your contemporaries, comic contemporaries, Ben Elton, who has said that cancel culture is, quote, not remotely threatening comedy, and he is free to say exactly what he wants. I mean, Jim, that's just not true, is it?
He's the start of this whole cancel culture situation. He was so lefty. And not only that, he proved you can be a popular television stand-up comedian without being funny at all.
There's a lot of them now, though, isn't there? Nish Kumar.
Well, you've only got to be slightly funny, and you're twice. Oh, Nish Kumar, don't get me going on that, because you can't even mention him because you get accused of all types of things. But Ben's up for grabs. And
go for Ben.
It will go for Ben. He just went on rants and rants and rants. You've got to admire him. He hated Margaret Thatcher. You could walk on and say, Margaret Thatcher, what a witch. Oh, he's brilliant, isn't he? And so he wasn't cancelled. So he can't really stand there and say other people should be cancelled, because he's the cancelling king. He's the king of the cancellers. Yeah.
Yeah, as always, the cancellers, by the way, Jim, who say cancel culture doesn't exist. No, absolutely. We'll add Graham Norton to that list too. Jim Davidson, comedy legend, slaying the woke week. Thank you, Jim. We'll speak next week. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Dominique Samuels, your GB nominee, please.
Mine is Claire Hibbs, a vaccine injury survivor. I spoke with her yesterday about her experience with vaccine injury, which has been formally acknowledged by medical professionals. She works to get compensation in a far more quicker and more accountable process for vaccine injury survivors.
I think we can see a little bit of her.
I had a neurologist who actually said to me, you should give yourself a pat on the back for taking one for the team. What? Yeah.
OK, good stuff. The future, Sean Bailey, according to Jim Davidson, you're the future. Who's the GB?
My greatest Britain are Harry and William, because it's really about brotherhood. It's about healing family divisions. It's about coming together. I'm one of the few people who hold out hope that they may well be able to get together after the launching of the book.
OK, and Sam Dowler, your greatest Britain nominee.
My greatest Britain nominee is Sam Smith. They have just gone #1 in the Billboard 100 in America and in the UK as well, with Ken Petras becoming the first non-binary solo artist and trans solo artist to top the charts all over the world.
Oh, she's trans.
She is.
OK, well, I'm going to go with Dominique Samuels, Claire Hibbs. That was a really good interview, Dominique. Union Jackass time now. Dominique Samuels, who are you going for?
Mine is Bill Gates, who has swanned into the UK this week, meeting the likes of Keir Starmer. He's my honorary union jackass because he just won't stop meddling in the affairs of other countries.
Yeah, just butt out, Bill. Sean Bailey, the future, who's your nominee?
My union jackass nominee is middle-class drug use. The police, in all their wisdom, right move, has started to change the focus of who they go after. You have lots of people who use drugs politely and don't know the absolute carnage it causes in other communities, both home and abroad, so the police are onto the right thing.
And Sam Dowler, your nominee for Union Jackass.
It's Kemi Badenoch for using her first time at the dispatch box to besmirch a British journalist and free speech because she didn't like an article written in Pink News about her.
Well, no, aren't you besmirching her right to free speech?
No. She said she also said that he'd been sued by a member of Parliament when he hadn't either. So do your research, Kemi.
Well, I saw it was quite interesting. Dawn Butler, the Labour MP, is wanting her to apologise for disinformation. That's the same Dawn Butler who believes that babies are born without an assigned gender. There you go. Gosh, it's a double win for Dominique Samuels. Of course, it's Bill Gates who is tonight's union jackass. Thank you so much to Dominic Samuels, the future, Sean Bailey, and Sam Dowler. Yeah, you're very much the past, Sam. I'll be back again on Monday night from 9 p.m. Mark Dolan here the next 3 nights, of course. Headliners is up next. Have a great weekend. Good night.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories